very much. My name is James Moore. Thank you to the Walrus for hosting this event. Thank you to Rogers for your investment in platforms such as this, and thank each of you in the audience for the privilege of your attention for a couple of minutes. It's true to say that the presidency of Donald Trump has been an enormous test and a stress test on institutions, politics, culture, the economy, and our patience, and much more. He announced his presidential candidate more than 10 years ago. He came down that golden escalator in the late spring of 2015, and the world has been captured by his presence ever since. It is possible that Prime Minister Carney and President Trump, perhaps with President Sheinbaum, could come to an agreement that would reaffirm the tripartite success of the North American trading platform and secure it for another generation. It's possible that that may happen. But because in spite of all the American political noise and the Canadian business panic, the reality is that the Canada-US trading relationship is profoundly successful. It is incredibly popular. It is stabilizing for security and is desired by both Americans and Canadians alike by overwhelming majorities of popular opinion in both countries. However, the fact of Trumpism, broadly defined as American antagonism toward the world and the hostility towards liberalized tariff-free trade, is not likely to go away anytime soon. The Trump effect is here for a long time. Donald Trump believes in tariffs, and his view is sacrosanct to everything that he believes in economically. In spite of any evidence or argument to the facts of the economic downside of his policy, he is locked into his view. And the Republican Party has entirely collapsed from the Ronald Reagan era through until today into a cult behind President Trump and his worldview. So it is what it is. The tariff policy shift is also, by the way, based on top of falsehoods. It's also based on some realities. And there are two. There's a fiscal reality and there's a political reality that come along with the Trump tariffs. The fiscal side of the reality of the Trump tariffs is that the tariffs that Donald Trump has so far brought in, perhaps likely to be escalated up over time, bring in about $30 billion of tax revenue every month into the U.S. Treasury. The United States is desperate for tax revenue. They have put in place tax cuts that are utterly unaffordable, economically inconsistent, and their fiscal framework is blowing apart at the seams. The tax revenue that's coming in from these tariffs has been blessed not just by Democrats, by the way, but also by the Republican Party. The traditional party that is supposed to be against tax increases, against tax hikes, they have now blessed tariffs, which are the biggest tax hike that the United States has seen since 1993. So the traditional tax-cutting party is now the biggest tax-increasing party in the United States, blessed by their leader, and the party is not likely to turn back on that policy anytime soon. The U.S. tariffs that have been brought in by President Trump amount to a $2,000 per household tax for every American family in the United States. And it's being blessed, and over 40% of Americans believe that they're not paying it, that foreigners are paying it. We are living in a world that is beyond understanding and not based in any kind of reality. But again, it is what it is, and you have to accept reality on reality's terms. So the tax is not only needed on the tariff side because of the revenue that it brings in, but it's also needed on the political side. In the last 12 presidential elections in the United States, the candidate who won both the states of Michigan and Pennsylvania won 10 out of the 12 last presidential election campaigns. So why does that matter to tariffs? Because when you hear steel and aluminum tariffs, hear the word Pennsylvania. When you hear the word auto tariffs, hear the state Michigan. You cannot win the presidency of the United States without winning Michigan and Pennsylvania combined. 10 of the last 12 presidential campaigns were won by candidates who won both of those states. So they need the money, and the candidates need the Electoral College. So when 2028 comes around and Steve Bannon says that President Trump is going to offer himself as the Republican candidate for the fourth time, he may or may not be on the ballot, we'll see. But whether it's Trump or it's Vance or it's Newsom or it's Hawley or whoever it may be, the Electoral College math is still the same. The revenue needs are still the same. We can get angry at Donald Trump and we can decry the reality of his tariff policies and what it's doing to Canada and what it's doing to the Canada-US relationship in terms of trade, but the fact of the revenue, the necessity of the revenue, the fact of the politics will not change when the orange man is gone. So what does this mean for Canada in terms of what we should do going forward? And I think this is clearly a moment for a call to action. And I'm here to talk about the economic sovereignty of Canada. And Canada is a brilliant country. We are capable of remarkable things. We're a country that has overcome enormous traumas and challenges throughout the sweep of our history in this country. From the Quiet Revolution to the October Crisis, to the Meech and Charlottetown, to referenda on destroying this country, to quiet revolutions, to all kinds of crises that we've had in our country. We've overcome divisions in this country that would absolutely destroy most countries in this world. From French and English, Protestant and Catholic in the early days, North and South, East and West, we have overcome enormous challenges that are still there, and they still need to be triaged and supported and managed through the fullness of time. But we are a country that can survive and will survive, and we need to move forward. Everybody talks about the virtues of the economic partnership within Canada, and it's there, but it is not yet fully fulfilled. Prime Minister Carney talks about elbows up and the need to break down internal barriers to trade, but he stops short of actually getting the ball across the goal line. He talked in the election campaign about the virtues of East-West internal trade and breaking down barriers. And by the way, so did Pierre Trudeau, and so did Bob Stanfield, and so did Brian Mulroney, and so did Stephen Harper, and so did Justin Trudeau, and so did Jean Chrétien, and so did Paul Martin, and so did Pierre Poilievre. Everybody talks a good game. Everybody talks a good game. And when I was Minister of Industry, I took a big run at trying to solve this riddle, and I learned a lot in the process. And the fact that American tariff necessity on the political side and the economic side is not going to go anytime soon, it means that this is a call to action. And I think Canadians are prepared to see real leaders take real action in order to get internal barriers to trade beaten down so that Canadians could do more business with each other than we do with the United States. Let's fortify the Canadian Economic Union and the Canadian family and do more business with each other than we have in the past than ever before. And there are 4 things that we can do to show real leadership to get this thing done. Prime Minister Carney talked a good game in the election campaign, and I'm glad that he talked a good game because at least he's emotionally and politically committed to it. But getting the job done means going much further than what he's done so far. He has said that he will break down the federal government's barriers to internal trade. Well, that's good, but that constitutes about 5% of the problem. The other 95% of the problem means getting the provinces on side to show leadership and to push in the right direction. It's one thing for Premier Ford to pull out a bottle of Crown Royal and look like a tough guy. It's another thing to replace that bottle of Crown Royal with some British Columbia wine so we can have East-West trade within the country. So what can we do? Here's what I propose. There are 4 things that we can do to actually get the ball moving in a meaningful way to break down internal barriers to trade. First, demand direct engagement of Canada's premiers. When I was minister and we tried to break down internal barriers to trade, there were some really thoughtful men and women, colleagues of mine who were my counterparts on the provincial side. They all talked a good game and they were earnest and sincere and they came to the table and they really wanted to get it done. But the reality is that the premiers really run the show in the provinces. If Prime Minister Carney wants to get this done and really wants to get the ball across the goal line, have a First Ministers' Conference specifically on internal barriers to trade and insist that the premiers themselves show up. Put down the pouring out of the bottle of the Crown Royal, stop the posturing, stop the nonsense, stop the Danielle Smith and saying we're going to build a pipeline. Show up to a meeting and be committed to making sure we have internal barriers to trade that are reciprocal and across this country. First thing, make the premiers own it and make them show up and do it personally. Second, start fresh. Canada is one of the most free trading countries in the world. We're the only country in the world with tariff-free, binding, non-tariff access to more than 52% of the global economy. We're a true trading country, free trading country. From the Hudson Bay Company through FTA, NAFTA, CPTPP, Canada-Europe free trade, all of it. We have more binding free trade access to any other country in the world. And when we start our free trade negotiations, we always start from an assumption that there will be open free trade, and then you can pile on exemptions that others have talked about having some kind of barriers to trade that are important for domestic reasons. But you start with an assumption of equal trade and equal access across the country that Canadians think should be the default anyway. So make sure the premiers show up, make sure they commit from a default position to having no internal barriers to trade. And then if they want to stack on barriers to trade for government procurement or for culture or for language, then make the argument and do so publicly and clearly in transparency, but put your name on it and own it as a premier and make sure you make your argument, and let's do it so we can understand each other better as Canadians and have the dialogue. Third thing we should do is that any final agreement on internal barriers to trade, premiers have to surrender some of their provincial sovereignty. You have to commit to a binding mechanism for dispute settlements that has teeth and is quick and is efficient so that you can say that it may not serve my local economic interest, but it serves the Canadian interest, and you have to be prepared to have a vehicle that will adjudicate disputes about internal free trade and surrender some of that sovereignty for the betterment of this country. It's been noted that the great Peter Lougheed is routinely mentioned as one of the greatest premiers of this country. And unlike some premiers of the province of Alberta, Peter Lougheed said very famously, "I am an Albertan and I am a proud Albertan, but I'm a Canadian first." We need more premiers in this country who talk their talk, but walk their talk, show up in person, are prepared to surrender to some dispute settlement mechanisms and put the country first. And the fourth thing that we need to do in order to get this thing done is we need to broadcast the whole thing live so Canadians can see it. We have had, we're used to this now. We see politics all the time. Barriers have been broken down. We see stuff on our phones. We know politics from 8 inches from our face in 4K resolution, and we can see sincerity. As the kids say it, real recognizes real. And we know politicians when they're full of it, and we know politicians when they are sincere. Let's get them all in a room. Let's make sure they own it. Let's make sure they walk their talk. Be committed to openness as a starting point. Educate us on why you think there should be barriers, and let's learn a little bit of something about our country. And let's air it and broadcast it so Canadians can hold everybody accountable and be honest and sincere about whether or not you put your politics first or do you put your country first. Do you put trade first or do you put your re-election first? And let's make sure that Canadians can see the dialogue, learn from each other, build a better country, and break down those internal barriers to trade. Have the premiers own it. Start from an assumption of openness, make sure that we have dispute settlement that works, and broadcast it so Canadians can see. And then we will really be elbows up. Then we'll be trading as much with Canadians as we do with Americans. And then we can stop the talk and really move forward to a more sovereign economic Canada. Thank you.